What's up, Mets fans? I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. 4-run lead, 5-run lead, 4-run lead. It just ended up being a outright disaster. I think a lot of things were good signs, and it was mostly with the lineup, the guys that you see on your screen right now in the middle of it. But hey, Chris, we got to start with Edwin Diaz. And how you doing, by the way?
Yeah, remember when I said during the pregame show that I could have definitely took a day off of Mets baseball today, being at some family member's house and all that good stuff? Well, I didn't because the lineup energized us well. The pitching let us down today, and we do got to start with Edwin Diaz because I know a lot of people, and myself included, were not quick to jump the gun on Edwin Diaz after a couple bad outings. Um, he don't look the same. And
No.
whether it's a mechanics issue, whether it's an injury lingering issue, there's something that needs to be corrected. And I don't know what the answer is, but the Mets, already being as bad as they are and inconsistent as they are, cannot afford what just happened today. So
No.
no, it's a good idea to start Edwin Diaz. Absolutely.
Yeah, it could be mechanics, and a lot of people are talking about the pitch count on X and in the chat right now. Remember, he didn't pitch in 2023 when the pitch count started, so this is new to him. I don't know if it's him rushing his pitches, if it's his mechanics. He's getting under every slider. It seems like every flat slider is in a big spot, and he hangs it. And when a slider is flat, you come a little bit more under that ball, and it's going to go up like a frisbee, and it's bad in practice. So, and Bell hit that slider, the hanging slider, and well, it tied the game. And look, when he hit that tying home run, I just told you, Chris, I'm gonna tell everybody in the chat, I turned it off. I didn't bother. I did quickly what I had to do, and because I know the Mets weren't going to win. I didn't care if they were going to score runs in the 10th inning, and somehow they were going to lose that game. It just felt like that. Of course, the Mets, who scored 9 runs, couldn't get the ghost runner home to at least get 1 run and make it interesting. So there's a lot to talk about, but yeah, I'm concerned about Edwin Diaz. Look, he had a major knee injury. I'm not going crazy. Just again, this is a month and a half of competitive baseball for him. He hasn't had a lot of opportunities because the Mets haven't given him a lot of opportunities. Maybe it's the lack of pitching, and he hasn't, because remember in 2022, Diaz pitched a lot, and it seemed like he got better when he pitched more. And it could be a lot of things. It could be the mechanics, could be off the entire year and never dealt with the pitch clock, or it's just the lack of use and his pitches are just not sharp. Now, we know his stuff is down a little bit of miles an hour or so or two, but I don't even think it's that because he was blown by people with the fastball. It's the slider. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you, what do you think it is? Pitch clock, mechanics, year off, or do you just think that he's back? I don't know. What is your opinion about Diaz's issues right now?
I see someone in the comment section saying something about the plant leg. I'm not going to make any speculations towards that. I'm not a team doctor. That's their job, not mine. Regardless, as he's not going out there and doing the job. If you look at the slider that he threw Josh Bell today, it was flat. It had zero movement, and it was right where a lefty wants to hit the ball, middle, low, right at the knees. That's where a lefty dreams of hitting baseballs. So the reasoning for Edwin Diaz's struggles could be anybody's guess. Have a hard time imagining that the mechanics are due to the pitch clock. I don't think I'll buy into that, but I will buy into that plant leg potentially being off. I don't but the thing is like I don't care at this point. Like I don't think any Mets fans jobs is to care what's wrong. I understand that it's going to take game reps for him to sort of get back to what he was. But that's a tough ask, and that's a tough sell for us Mets fans who are sitting here continuously looking at what we're looking at.
Yeah.
So that begs a better question. Like, should the Mets IL him if it's remnants of the injury? Should they just sit him down? Should they get him reps? I hate to say it, and I know that not many people are going to want to send him down. I'm not even sure if that's feasible in their brains, but could be if he needs extra reps at the MLB level is not the place to do it because even Edwin Diaz and how superior he is and usually is, right? He looks human.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I don't know what it is, Rob, but all I know is that it's unacceptable. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, and you,
And that's
and
it.
you know what? Mendoza, like I understand putting Diaz in that spot, you got to get him work. A 4-run lead, you should be fine. You know, like you know, even if Diaz, isn't great and you win by a run, all right, fine, you gave him the rep. Like the only thing that I question Mendoza about, and he's done this numerous times this year, which I understand the concept of it, and I said it on X. I don't like him taking out guys like Nimmo and Martinez. I know, like you put in
I
Tyrone
hate
Taylor and
that. I
Nimmo,
hate that.
that is for defensive purposes. Like Nimmo's a scrub defensively, and the Martinez things I get because you could still score a run there, and Martinez ain't the fastest of foot. I get that, but you leave yourself in a position where if something happens like today or tonight, guess what? Now you lose your DH number one. That's already a bad thing. And number two, if this game went a little bit longer, you already lost the pitcher because you had a pinch hit because you lost the DH. So, and look at the middle of the order. You had DJ Stewart and Tyrone Taylor in the middle of your order, and that should have been Nimmo and Martinez. And maybe it's a different outcome. Even if we won this game, there was a lot of bad signs. And look, we can talk about the good things because the lineup scored 9 runs. You got to win a ball game when you score 9 runs. I'm sorry, you just have to. You had a 4-run lead and a 5-run lead. You got to win that ball game, Chris. It's I know Mendoza's had. I think he's done really well this year. I would give him a B right now, but I don't. I understand the concept, like taking those guys out, but Nimmo, like it's not like it was like Marte who you're trying to protect from injury and you took him out. You didn't take him out. You took Nimmo out, which made no sense. And the Martinez thing, I get more because you don't want him running the bases, and maybe you can get him running the score if it's hitting a gap, even with a lead. But you put yourself in a scenario where you have nowhere to turn if it comes up in extra innings, and is exactly what happened. And it probably burned him, even though Diaz was the main issue. That also came up in the top of the 10th. So I don't know.
I I agree with you too because when Edwin Diaz came into the game, like I said, I had to step away for a little bit, and all of a sudden I get back a couple minutes later and it's 9-9. Edwin Diaz is exiting the ball game, and my jaw dropped. But then when it goes to the top of the 10th, I see DJ Stewart's in there in the 3 hole. I'm like, what just happened to Brandon Nimmo? Like, this is a situation where, you make a lineup like today for that reason. And I agree with everybody in the chat. This shouldn't have come down to that decision by Mendoza. He was doing the classic, obviously defensive replacements, and he was aligning his defense the way he wanted it to. But hard to align a defense when your pitcher gives up an absolute bomb to dead center field. Doesn't really matter at that point. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with everyone in the chat as well. You can't blame it on Mendoza. This is not something that, and in hindsight, really is 2020 when we're talking about the decision. Even though I don't like it, and I agree with you, Rob. Edwin Diaz, if he is healthy enough to appear on the field, he's healthy enough to get 3 outs at the 4-run lead. That's the bottom line. That really is the bottom line. But I agree with you. Just looking at it in hindsight in the 10th inning, it really hurts that Pete Alonso, with the runner scoring position, hits a ground ball. Obviously, he did the job, but you know that you play for 2 as the away team. You play for 2 in that inning. So starting it off in that manner from your 2-hole hitter that's supposed to be one of your best hitters in the lineup sucks. And then you have DJ Stewart coming up and striking out, right? So, or I believe he struck out. He got out. Doesn't matter. He didn't get the job done anyway. So that's the case in point
Yeah.
right there. So I agree with everybody, man. This is a tough loss. This is a tough pill to swallow. there's not many words that we can come up here and say to try to justify a loss like this. And I feel like, I don't know why I'm getting this sort of deja vu moment on a game that we should have won today that was blown in the 9th inning, and we're coming up on here in a post game and everyone's in the chat dooming and glooming, which you have every right to be. Like if there are conversations that start about trying to like mitigate this season in terms of becoming sellers, is this point a little bit too early? No, because this is the 45 game mark, right? And this is that 45 game period of analysis that we're talking about David Stearns and that approach. It's a half a season sample size that David Stearns is going to work with to try to determine if you're sellers or buyers. So you're approaching that halfway point within the first half, that quarter point. I don't know, man. It's bad news all around. And games where you have struggled offensively, like getting shut out by an inferior Marlins team the night before, to then go out and put up 9 runs in a just grand fashion. I love everything that was happening today. Extra base hits, hits up the middle. Boy, the Mets were spreading that middle of the infield, right, on either side of that second base bag. You can't blow it. Edwin Diaz didn't look sharp. Reed Garrett didn't look sharp. Obviously, I understand the decision in terms of trying to push Luis Severino to that extra 7th inning and get him across the 7th inning, but that didn't work out because the walks crept up and he just got figured out. A lot of things from the pitching side, and we've been talking about this team getting carried a little bit by the pitching, right? The bullpen and the starting pitching, but this is not one of those games. This is not one of those games. This is embarrassing. This is deflating. This is demoralizing, and this makes a lot of Mets fans not want to come around tomorrow and watch this team. Like you know what I mean? Like, we should be excited and talking about this post game with excitement because the new lineup, for whatever reason, produced and translated to 9 runs, but we're not. And people are pissed, and they have every right to be, man. I'm pissed as well.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm not even going to get on anybody in the comments because your opinions, even if I don't agree with all of them, are warranted. No matter what you say, what Easy said, what Joel said, what Will said, I can go down the list. There's 126 people in the stream right now, so I'm trying to catch up on everybody. Everybody's typing like crazy. But explosive, all you guys, you're right. Listen, and you don't, if you don't want to blame Mendoza, I'm perfectly fine with that. You're gonna blame Diaz and Severino. I'm all on board with that. But again, you can't leave yourself handcuffed with scenarios that could happen if the game gets tired. This is not a situation. Mendoza, Carlos Mendoza, basically, substituted players like he was playing old school National League Baseball with the pitcher, like double switches. Like, you just don't make those type of moves. There's no reason to take out Nimmo for Tyrone Taylor. Now, Taylor might be technically, analytically, a better defensive player, but it's not that much of a difference. That didn't make sense. Now, maybe Mendoza was thinking that Nimmo is coming off being really sick, and maybe Nimmo told him that, he feels weak or whatever. Maybe I didn't watch the post game, see what's going on, but the JD Martinez thing made no sense. You were already up a couple of runs. Just leave him because that bat could be crucial just in case. And I know that's kind of thinking after the fact because the outcome was the outcome, and if the Mets won the ball game, nobody would have talked about that. But it became a talking point in the 10th inning when he had DJ Stewart pitch in for Nimmo, and and Tyrone Taylor pitch in for, or the other way around. Like, it just didn't make sense. Like, now it's a talking point, and he's done this many a times, and it hasn't burned him, and it burned him today. And again, you can't lose a 4-run lead, you can't lose a 5-run lead in one game against the worst team one of the worst teams in baseball. You just can't. And you keep on throwing away these type of games if and when and possibly in 40 games from now, when we're getting closer to the deadline and we're within striking distance of a third wild card spot. Those games will matter. We're going to be talking about those games if David Stearns decides to sell at 5 games back or 4 games back of a wild card, and he sells, and 50% of the fan base is going to be pissed because they said you got to go for it because you're not that far away. Well, it's games like today that cost you 40 games from now when you played 85, 90 plus games and you're heading toward the deadline where your organization has options of selling or buying, because Stearns did set up this team to give him options, as we talked about many times over many shows, Chris. So look, I'm not talking about the trade deadline yet because we're 45 games in. It's not fair. I know I got the wrong record because I put that up there prior to, wishful thinking before. But, I don't know, Chris.
We got a lot of people in the chat. We got a lot of people airing out their frustrations. Like you said, all valid. Hit that thumbs up for us and subscribe to both channels. This is being streamed to both channels. So just to let everybody know.
Comments, if you want me to click them up and put them up, I can, because they're flying past like right now. I'm trying to read.
So I saw Paul in the chat here saying that just a slider, Diaz, no movement on the slider. And this is what we've seen with the Mets pitchers that are dominant with the slider here the last two nights, right? We talked about in the pregame, the telltale sign, and it's very easy to tell with slider dominant pitchers within their off-speed arsenal when they are going to be at the top of their game versus when they're not going to be. And the lack of movement on the sliders is very easy to tell. Like we said in the pregame, the Nick Fortes home run on the Christian Scott slider that had absolutely no movement to a righty at the top of the zone. And then tonight with Diaz, zero movement to a lefty at the bottom of the zone, both middle relatively. That's just like easy money at the MLB level. Like you throw a slider like that with no movement, no late break, that is getting sent however far Josh Bell sent that home run today. And I agree with everybody in the chat. Like, Diaz is a great guy. And honestly, his leadership was dearly missed in 2023. And a lot of guys can attest to that, especially in the clubhouse, because they've said it time and time again. But like we're saying here, if the Mets are really trying to push this playoff narrative, and we keep on hearing we fully expect the Mets to make the playoffs from both Steve Cohen after he deletes a tweet talking about we can't do anything until the deadline, about David Stearns in the beginning of the season. I mean, you can't trot out Edwin Diaz out there consistently if he's showing you this is what he's got. Yeah. You can't. So, but I agree with you. There's a lot to pinpoint here. And it's just a shame. I wish the tone of this post game to end the Saturday was a lot different. And of course, we'll do a roundtable here soon to get everybody's opinions. Obviously, Hayden, who's in the comment section, Hector as well. So be on the lookout for that. But shout out to Zach, Daniel, Ricardo, Carlos, Darren, my guys. Appreciate you guys being here. Yeah, this is bad. And how do you assess Luis Severino's performance? Because for me, if he just went to flat 6 innings, I think it's a great start. I think you got everything you need out of Luis Severino.
To be honest with you, because that started to like unravel a little bit. Even though the Mets got insurance runs, it's still. I think it kind of was like, it started to like feel like the momentum was shifting. Even when the Mets were scoring those runs to get those insurance runs in the later innings. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it sucks with Severino, but again, he hasn't really been good after the 6th inning. And I'm not too analytical, but looking at the numbers, he's bad after the 6th inning. I would have just took him out, give him a good start, keep his confidence up, and roll with your bullpen. And maybe we don't end up talking about a terrible loss like that.
At least after, because Gary said it on the broadcast, right? Besides one start from Luis Severino going 8 innings, right? He's been basically 5 innings and change, and 6 innings if you're lucky. So I think after that walk during that 7th inning or 6th inning, whatever it was, during that walk, after the walk, you gotta pull him at that point. But overall, for the first 6 innings, he held up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Easy was talking about, don't bring up don't talk about Mendoza, don't blame Mendoza. But those are simple little moves that you don't think of until you lose the game, and that's a talking point now. Like you just brought up, like I understand you want to keep Severino and get that 7th inning, and I don't even think it's to save the bullpen. I think it's just to give Severino the confidence to go longer in games. But you also have to think of the overall team. You have to think of the win, not just the confidence of one player. And look, Mendoza tried to do it. Look, somebody, I forgot, with Severino, but the same thing with the Mendoza situation with Diaz. And this involves Luis Severino getting taken out or not with Mendoza. Explosive brought up, should Edwin Diaz even be pitching with a former lead versus the Marlins? Yes, because the Mets haven't been giving him a chance to have a workload and pitch more. Like, they're trying to get him reps. Like, hasn't been a lot of save situations for Diaz. So Mendoza is trying to find spots for him to pitch. This was a perfect scenario to put in Diaz because you got a 4-run lead. He can work on things, not give up too much. I mean, it happened so fast. Mendoza couldn't take him out fast enough. Like that was not on Mendoza to not take him out. Like, what are you supposed to do there? But that was a perfect spot for him. It's just that it blew up in his face so quickly that what is Mendoza gonna do? What happens if he would have brought in Jorge Lopez or Ottavino and they would have gave up the runs? People would have said, "Oh, you should have put in Diaz," right? They would have been people like that as well. So, look, in a game like this, you can blame everybody from the pitching to management on this side. Because the offense, you can kill them for the 10th inning, but they did give the pitchers 9 runs, like more than enough. If you don't win that ball game, you have a lot of question marks in regards to your pitching, at least in this game. Because how many runs did we give up? 18 runs to the Miami Marlins in 2 games. You can't do that. I'm sorry.
So, and Joel is saying here in the chat, Diaz hardly had a spring training also. So if that's the case, just pull a JD Martinez and go sit down in the minor leagues and get a couple of rehab starts and get ramped up for the first couple of weeks instead of trying to do it at the major league level and failing miserably. That's where I don't understand it. So if we're using spring training as an excuse, I'm not saying you are, Joel. I'm just saying that if this is what the Mets fan base collectively and what the Mets organization are going to try to push upon us as to why this is happening, then there's no reason he should have been up with the big league team to start the season anyways.
Correct.
Really.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And that makes JD Martinez's decision to do that much more respectable. Because at first, I'm going to hold myself accountable and say I don't buy into him starting in the minor leagues at all. But now you can clearly see that it's necessary sometimes.
Yeah, and you know what? This is a situation where, coming off a bad season last year, the Mets were trying to get some hype or excitement back to the fan base, and Diaz was one of those exciting, bring your ass to the seats fan base to bring them to the seats. And Diaz was one of those guys. It brought the fans, with the trumpets and all that stuff. And I know that's silly to think as an organization, but they were trying to revitalize a fan base that was, one, pissed off from last season, depressed about an offseason that a lot of people didn't like, and then going into the season where people didn't think they had much of a chance to do anything. They were trying to revitalize a fan base that was down in the dumps ever since they lost the division in 2022 and played horrible in the playoffs. And then we know what happened in 2023. So I get what they were trying to do, but, somebody has to be smarter. And, I guess you can, give that blame to David Stearns because of the fact that he's running things, and he usually don't make those emotional decisions. Now, it's possible Steve Cohen made that decision for him. We don't know. We're not, I would love to have been a fly on the wall during that discussion. But I find it hard to believe because there's a lot of moves where I think Steve Cohen probably wouldn't have done if he had the call, and Stearns makes these calls, and it seems like it's emotionless when he makes these decisions, roster decisions. So maybe it just was, Diaz says he felt good, he was ready to go, and you trust the player, right? When he says, I feel good. And if the doctors clear him, what are you supposed to do? Keep him in the minors for work? It's like in the JD Martinez situation, it kind of made a little bit more sense, even though we didn't like the why he was starting the year in the minor leagues. He did get signed late So the Diaz situation, I don't know, but I mean, look, questions are gonna unravel all over the place on Mets Twitter, everywhere. Like, I mean, we got 172 in the chat right now, and it keeps on growing. And make sure you hit that like button, guys. If you're on X, come over to our channels and subscribe to the channel as well, so you get this type of back and forth with me and Chris. We do pre games, we do in-game lives, we do so many shows we can't even count anymore. But this is a show where, if you notice, Chris, I know this is kind of, I guess, bad for us and well, good for us, but bad for the Mets. When things are negative, the views start to increase
Go up.
just
Absolutely.
because people like to voice their opinions or their words in the chat. And I think it's important because it's not just therapy for me and you, even though we're pissed off and we rather be, winning games all over the place. But this is therapy. Like, who would I be talking to? I would be talking to my cat. Like, seriously, my cat would be looking at me like, "Feed me, bitch! Like, leave me alone." Like, this is our therapy, and everybody else is in the chat as well. I don't know how you feel about it, but that's the way I feel.
No, I agree, and we appreciate everyone coming out. Like I said, like diehard Mets fans are here and telling us what they think is wrong with the team because they care about this team, regardless of what your opinion is. And at this point, there's really no wrong opinions. There's really no wrong opinions. It's a vent session, like Patty's saying. Thor says that you're absolutely right, Rob. So yeah, this is a vent session, and yeah, the views go up when things are bad. I don't know, man. This is something where it helps me get things off my chest as well, talking to you and talking to the chat after a game like this, because then I can just go enjoy the rest of my Saturday and worry about my New York Knicks tomorrow, and hopefully it's not a blown series lead as well. So happy the Rangers are through, right? Happy the Rangers are through. We do Blue Shirts banner on the show as well for the post games there. But yeah, it's tough times right now. And I would say tough times don't last, but at this rate, the way the season's going and how this team is losing ball games, I don't know. I don't know what to expect here moving forward. We went out on a limb before the season saying that they were going to be 85, 86, an 86 win team, especially after the addition of JD Martinez. But yeah, I don't know. It's honestly like there's very few times where I am honestly speechless. But this is one of those times. Like usually I have like a rhyme or reason to like everything and like this is what went wrong because of XYZ. I don't really like besides Edwin Diaz just blowing the lead like what else can we say here? So appreciate you Robert Rob subscribe guys. Appreciate you keep hitting that subscription button. Keep hitting the thumbs up. But yeah, let's talk about the lineup because Pat is asking about the lineup. Um, the personnel within the lineup, we can talk about the individual performances. I personally liked what the Mets did today, given the personnel that they had. I just want to give a special shout out to Mark Vientos as well, because he had a hell of a ball game. Made a couple great plays at third base as well, which was
A
very
big play too.
noteworthy. So shout out to Mark Vientos. Um, we talked about liking the personnel. Lindor at the top. He took the 0 for 5. Brandon Nimmo, obviously 1 for 4. He came up twice in this game, had 2 at-bats as the leadoff hitter when the lineup turned over, ending at Pete Alonso. But all in all, I think it was effective. And this is one of those times where the bottom of the lineup, you see, really did carry. Starling Marte had a great game. JD Martinez obviously having a great game. Mark Vientos, Jeff McNeil having a great game. So is it a product of the lineup that they tossed out there? Maybe not so much this game. That's not why they put up 9 runs, but I still like the process. And it's going to take more than one game of a sample size to truly understand if Lindor should be your leadoff hitter moving forward, if Brandon Nimmo should be your third hitter moving forward. And I told you before we got into the game, this is not an excuse, but Nimmo didn't have great numbers in his career against Braxton Garrett anyways. So this is kind of like an interesting time to do it, but I'm glad they did because at this point, with the way the offense has been rolling, a shakeup, any shakeup is good. And I know we like to talk about a consistency and trying to get some consistency in the lineup. So I think that they really should like roll forward with this lineup more often than not here just to see if this lineup is it or not. But, the lineup that what else was I going to say? The lineup didn't lose this team the ball game. They've lost this team many ball games here this season so far, but they did not lose this team this ball game today. Absolutely not.
Yeah. 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 Look, if we win the ball game, we're going to be hyping up this lineup, the new change. We were positive, excited about this new lineup. Oh, yeah. Lindor had an offer, but he did have a couple of quality at bats that, he had longer at bats, which he really doesn't do in the 3-hole. That was good. Alonso, Nimmo, Martinez, Vientos. Everyone, Marte, Harrison Bader with the big 2 RBIs. McNeil went back to his novelist bat and was 2 for 4. He's starting to show. Even Tomas.
Did he actually? Did he actually go back to it?
He did. Yeah.
Okay,
He
got it.
did. So
I didn't know because we were talking about that in the in game. Remember, I told you about him having the knob there, and if people were like wondering if he was going to go back to it, and him choking up versus not choking up. So that's interesting. I must admit.
Hey, listen, when you're a 300 hitter and you can't hit 300 anymore, you go back to anything that got you to that point. I don't know why change, but egos get the best of people sometimes, and you think you are what you're not, and then it gets you into a situation where McNeil is the last 2 seasons. So the Mets are 5 games below 500, the first time since they are 0-5 to start the season. Well, we're only 2.5 games out of the wild card,
Oh my goodness! I should have never made that graphic on the
We talked
pregame.
about it in the pregame, so I thought it was just silly to bring it up
I
right
should have
now.
never put that graphic in the pregame. Oh my goodness! Not my intention. I apologize. All right.
Man, yeah, I'm not sure where to go with this team, except that we got a tough road ahead of us. We got Cleveland after Miami. Well, we got to salvage tomorrow's game. Like the pitching has to be better. The lineup, if they do what they did today, they might be fine. But it's just a matter of the pitching. Like, can the pitching hold up? What do you do now? Do you make, somebody else your closer? Reed Garrett is been struggling lately. I think they've been using that guy way too much, but he's been playing well. So I think where it comes down to is that Diaz cannot be the closer right now. Ottavino. There were some people that said on X, Ottavino should have came out for the 9th. He only threw 6 pitches in the 8th. Yeah, but if Mendoza would have done that, Ottavino would have blew the game. People would have said, "Why'd you keep him in?" So again, you're gonna second guess yourself. Your Monday morning quarterback in after the results. It's hard to do that. So they got to shake up the bullpen a little bit. Maybe you push people up. Maybe you do a closer by committee, matchup wise. I guess that's what you have to do. Maybe throw Diaz in the 7th inning just to give him less pressure in a save situation. Just put him in the 7th, regardless of the score. Throw him in there, let him get his reps, and then when that slider is not hanging every other slider, and because I think his fastball is fine. He was blowing people away with the fastball. It was just they were waiting for his slider, and they capitalized on the slider when it came. So, what would you do right now, Chris? Because it's starting to become an issue now because one of your best bullpen arms in Reed Garrett is starting to fluster a little bit, which happens with every bullpen guy. They're gonna have bad outings, but Ottavino has been good. Lopez has been pretty good. He got out of that jam the other night. Couldn't get out of it today, but it was just unraveling, not all his fault. What do? Do you take Diaz out of the closer spot and just let him pitch the 6th inning, the 7th inning, or whatever?
But my problem with that is though, if you do that, you're still gonna be like this was as the lowest leverage situation you possibly could have put Adam or Edwin Diaz into this game. Like if you pitch him during the 6th or 7th inning, the first guy up out of the bullpen, you're only pitching with a 2-run lead, right? That's what Reed Garrett got thrusted into. So I don't know, man. Maybe find lower leverage situations, but it's not going to get any lower of a leverage than a 4-run lead. It's really not. So I do think that you have to pull him as the closer, especially in tighter ball games, say like a 1 or 2-run ball game. Adam Ottavino probably should be that guy. And Patty's asking about Brooks Raley, who's been a huge hit to this bullpen in terms of the flexibility that Mendoza actually has. I wouldn't expect him back anytime soon. with that elbow inflammation, and it just seems like his timeline is just not progressing as quickly as the Mets would have hoped after he got IL'd for 15 days.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Adam Ottavino, you're going to have to rely on him as an anchor until you feel confident enough with Edwin Diaz to thrust him back into that role. But like I said, there's nothing else that Mendoza could have done today. He played it the way he should have played it. Maybe you trot Adam Ottavino back out there for the 9th inning. I saw someone in the chat earlier say that. Maybe that's the play. But I don't think it's too much to ask to go out there and get 3 outs and
No.
not blow a 4-run game, to be honest with you. I don't think it's that much of an ask. So,
I,
and MEZ's right. MEZ's absolutely right. And he's been saying this to the cows come home. Hefner should be feeling
yep.
serious heat. And we've
Absolutely.
been saying it up on here too. He should be feeling
Yeah.
serious heat. That's
Yeah.
the bottom
Absolutely.
line. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and you know what? If Diaz didn't need work and he was getting his reps, you might have seen a Drew Smith, you might have seen a Diekman in the 9th. Somebody, maybe somebody in the back end of the bullpen that you don't see much. You might have seen a Shorten Reed Foley, somebody that is the back end guy that don't get a lot of outings. You might have seen that, but again, Mendoza was trying to get work for Diaz, thinking that the lead was comfortable enough. And one of the best closers in baseball, the last time you seen him on a mound in Major League Baseball, you expect him, even if he wasn't good, to still win you the ball game with a 4-run lead. Like, what are you? I don't know. I just don't know anymore because, you lose Raley, like you said. That's a trusted left-handed arm that you had that double lefty in the bullpen that was so important. And we talked about that in the offseason. Having 2 lefties is crucial to a good bullpen. And the bullpen was one of the best in baseball. And, now we got Raley. Who knows? He might need Tommy John. Who knows when he'll be back, if he'll be back this year. That hurts. You're starting to get through your depth now, which is going to hurt because, who do you got in the minors that you're going to bring up? Even though Stearns is, magician with that, you actually need guys that actually do well as well. So, I mean, yeah, again.
One thing, not to cut you off, one thing I wanted to say, and this is like one of the most important aspects to actually point out with Edwin Diaz. The first couple times he was able to laugh it off and he was able to sort of just brush it off. But after today, like Can I Live right here in the comment section, Diaz sounded defeated at the post-game interview. He seems absolutely shot. And the facial expression that he let off after he saw that ball leave the yard. And he did the classic Hansel Robles went into the air as if it were a routine fly ball instead of an absolute game-tying bomb that Josh Bell hit. Yeah, he's defeated. And like that's one thing. You can come back from poor mechanics because you can fix that, but it's going to take multiple good outings to build that confidence back up. And usually that's not something you expect from a lights out closer like Edwin Diaz. But I feel for him and I understand why he's feeling that way, to be honest with you. But that's just something that as soon as you see that, it makes you question like right how high of leverage situations from here on out for the foreseeable future you can put him in. And I don't think that there's anybody else on this team that's suited to close a ball game better than Adam Ottavino. So that is answering. I don't know who asked that in the chat, but nonetheless, Dave, he asked that. Jorge Lopez. Someone said in the comment section way earlier that Jorge Lopez was fired up after the loss. Like he was visibly frustrated.
Yeah, he like punched the water cooler or something like that.
I gotta find that.
Yeah.
I gotta find that because that guy's a gamer, man. Like regardless of what the results are, he's a gamer and he's gonna be a huge piece
He's
in
been
this
solid.
bullpen
And
until the
look, he's
deadline.
been a closer with the Orioles. So it's
Yeah.
not like he hasn't done it before. So
Yeah.
I mean, why not? He's got the attitude for it, like he said. And yeah, he did. He got into the dugout and he hit something. I don't know if it was the water cooler, but he hit something and it popped up in the air. So he's a feisty guy. He's a guy that has that demeanor for the closer role. he does have problems with walks, but every Mets pitcher does. So I mean, you might as well try it. You can't throw Diaz out there again. If you do that, you're just playing with fire, and it just shows you that they don't have a plan. And what I've seen so far, Stearns and Mendoza, they have a plan when they get into the game, and I think they're going to come up with something. You got to pitch Diaz. If you got to pitch him in the earlier innings. Like, it might not mean he might give up a couple of runs, but get him the work, get him right. Because if the minor leagues ain't an option, you got to figure out a way. You can't just sit him in the bullpen and waste a roster spot. You got to pitch him at some point and find a spot for him. I would just pitch him in like the 6th or the 7th, like the first bullpen arm out after the starter. I throw him in the ball game. I know that's like crazy thinking, but you have to do something to get him back on track, because this team, without Diaz being at least above average closer, isn't doing anything. We seen it, what happened last year, how it demoralized the team along with injuries. It's going to demoralize this team as well. Like, you need him to be a solid closer. You don't have to be 2022 Diaz. He needs to go out there and not blow these type of games, because this team will be dead by June again. And we'll be talking about the deadline and who we're trading, because I don't want that to be the case this year, because it sucks. I don't want to go through 80 games, 85 games, and the season is over, and now we're having roundtables talking about everything but the games. That's a problem, because we went through that last year with the roundtable. I think it was like middle of July, we were talking, like late June, we were talking about everything else about the offseason. Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, this guy, who we're trading, what are we going to do? Not the games. And that is very, very annoying.
And I don't want to talk about that either. I want to talk about a playoff team or being in competition for a playoff spot. And I know that's ridiculous to even say on such a stream like this, so I apologize if that triggers anybody. But nonetheless, we are approaching, and we have to be very realistic about what territory we're approaching, even if it's only 45 games through.
Yep.
They're approaching sell territory, and we can save this discussion for a different stream. We can save it for 2, 3, 4 weeks out, whenever that time hits and that time nears. But regardless of what Steve Cohen meant to say on Twitter, whether he meant to say it as a DM, whether he meant to tweet it out in public, don't know, it was deleted, don't care. The fact that that was even uttered and typed out by Steve Cohen himself shows you just a little bit about the Mets front office kind of already having those internal discussions if worst case comes to worst. And now, I don't want to say this is worst case scenario after game 45, but let's be objective. How much worse does it get from here after a 4-run lead was blown in the last inning in a game that you were supposed to come back and win versus one of the worst teams in baseball, objectively, record wise, right? They have some talent over there. I'm not going to dispute that. And I don't even think Marlins fans, since it seems we have a couple Marlins fans in the chat, I don't think Marlins fans at the beginning of the season were expecting that record to be what it is right now. But yeah, I don't even know. Like, I'm speechless, Rob. Like, what else do we say?
Yeah, and going back to what we talked about with Cohen, like we got on, a lot of people got on Steve Cohen for tweeting that, yet every Met fan thought the same thing. So your owner is thinking like you, the fan, and you're mad about that. Like, we all thought the same thing going through this stretch right now. So what was he supposed to think? You know what? I'd rather have an owner in the know and be in reality than not being in reality. And the reason why he deleted that tweet is because Met fans are assholes. Everybody went after him. That's why he deleted it, because he didn't want to deal with the comments. And I don't blame him. The fact of the matter is, he said what we all thought. And because he made it a reality, people don't like that. That's the problem. It is what it is. Deal with it. This is baseball. This is a business. As much as everybody loves to win and lose and all that stuff, it is a business. The Pete Alonso situation is a business. The Juan Soto thing with the Yankees is a business. That's it. It comes back to trade a deadline is part of the business. It is what it is. It sucks, but it has to become reality. Like last year, Met fans were lost in reality last year. CP, we went through how many hours of trade deadlines shows that
A
people were
lot.
bitching and
Yeah.
moaning. Oh, you're not too far out of the wild card. How can you trade everybody? Blah blah blah. Well, it was the right decision right away. Some people took a little bit longer to realize that, but it ended up helping the organization as a whole in the longer run. This might be another scenario like that. Look, we don't want that to be the case, right? We don't want to be in the deadline knowing we're going to be sellers. Worst case scenario, as we talked about, Chris, is we're in between, where it could go either way, where half the fan base wants to be sellers, half the fan base wants to be buyers and go for it. But deep down, we all want to go for it, but you also have to take the emotion out of that type of situation, because if you don't, you're going to end up like the fan base was last year, fighting with each other that we should have bought, we should have sold, we should have bought, we should have sold. And it's coming to a conclusion where if this doesn't turn around and they're not even close to a wild card, I mean, most of the fans would be in agreement to sell, but when it comes time to trade Pete Alonso, which the Mets better do if you're out of contention, because you would be the stupidest organization known to man. You don't want to do, I'm going to go with hockey here, the John Tavares with the Islanders, where you thought he was going to sign and you lose out on getting draft picks and top draft picks and top players for him and a bunch back. And you can go back
Yep.
to many other trades that haven't happened, right? That's why the Nationals traded Juan Soto, right? Because they knew they offered him a contract. He said no, they weren't going to give him what he wanted, and he was gone. You have to get what you can for those type of players, because if you don't trade them and you lose 90 games and you don't sign him in the offseason, now you lost out on top prospects and you didn't retain the player. That is the worst case scenario, and you cannot have that, regardless of how much you might love Pete Alonso or any other player that might get traded during this frenzy of selling, if that becomes the case. It's just a fact.
I think a lot of people that love Pete Alonso would be mad at that, but I have no and I like Pete Alonso. Like at the beginning of the season, I was talking about we need to make it a priority to get a deal done. But I agree with you, Rob. If it comes down to that, Pete Alonso has to go as well. I agree. I agree. You wouldn't be doing your due diligence as a front office if you didn't do that. Like that would be even a worse look to think and get duped by Mr. Boris and company that he's going to resign after another lost season, and then you just lose out on him. So no, I agree with you, and I think that even some Pete Alonso fans are coming around to that fact.
They
Hayden
are.
on every roundtable, like he's even
Yeah,
coming around to that fact. To be
right.
honest with you,
Well,
right? He's the
he's come around ever since that story about him refusing saying no to a contract extension.
7
So
years, 158. If that was legit, Pete Alonso messed up by not taking that.
listen, I'm gonna tell you right now, that is not even a team friendly deal that the Mets offered. That was a more of a player friendly deal on the player's side than a team friendly deal, because to start off with 7 years, $158 million tells me that the Mets would be willing to go a little bit further in a contract for Pete
Right,
Alonso. And I'm sorry,
right.
I get on Pete Alonso a lot. I don't want him to leave. I would love a guy end his career as a Met, his whole career. Like that would be the first one in history of this organization. I want that. But you also, David Stern doesn't care about 20 years from now when we can talk about that in history books. He's worried about keeping his job after his 4-year contract. He needs to do the right thing here. And like you said, Chris, Hayden, big Met fans are starting to come around to it, because you have to understand, who do we root for? We root for the name on the front of the jersey, not the back of the jersey. Chris, you brought that up a couple of shows ago, and that's 100% true. You have to understand that. I'm not saying you can't love a player. We all have favorite players. All right. It might be the best player on a team. It might be somebody that is the 24th man on the roster. My favorite player growing up was Ray Ordonez. He was never the best player on the Mets. He was one of the worst players on the Mets, but he just caught my eye. But I understood at a young age that things happen for a reason in sports, specifically any sport, doesn't matter, right? You know, Chris, we're a perfect example. You're a big Knicks fan, right? When the Knicks traded Obi Toppin, that hurt a little bit, but you understood the trade, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. And you can
100%.
go with many others, right? You know, Rangers, Ryan McDonough, the captain, right? They traded him. Why? Because they knew they had to. They had to worry about the future. And this is what you have to worry about as well. Yeah, Chris.
And to this point, because I know the Pete Alonso discussion here is very sensitive amongst Mets fans, and it should be, right? This guy's a homegrown Met, all this, all that. I understand all that. We objectively on this podcast, right, with the way the Mets are going right now, like this has always been a discussion, but even more so right now, it's more of a focal point. So it would be doing a disservice if we didn't talk about it. I don't know about you, Rob. I can't speak for you on this, but for me personally, when we talk about possibly having to trade Pete Alonso, if the Mets aren't going to be buyers, that they're not going to improve the roster to make a run at a wild card spot, this is for the greater good of the team, like you just said. This is not us trying to blame Pete Alonso for the Mets' woes. Now, Pete Alonso definitely has a portion and a stake in some blame there because we blame the core all the time. That extends beyond Pete Alonso, though. That's to McNeil. That extends to Lindor. I see a couple comments about in this chat about Lindor and potentially trying to offload him as well. And it gets back to the point of the Mets needing a culture change, a clubhouse change, a more, I don't want to say tight-knit unit because I'm not going to say they're not tight-knit, although there's a lot of question marks surrounding that as well. But a team that can show us they have a little bit more fight to them than this, right? A little bit, and I hate to say it, a little bit more of a resemblance of a clubhouse that we always hear about from former players, current players, etc., that everyone tries to emulate in the Atlanta Braves. We want winners in New York. That's it. And I'm not saying Francisco Lindor is not a winner. I'm not saying Pete Alonso is not a winner, but it hasn't happened since this core has been assembled. So Lindor, unfortunately, I think if there was an option to sort of flip Lindor, I would do it, and I'd enter. I would do it too, and I'd enter that sort of rebuild because I do think the Mets are needing of that. I just don't know how feasible it is to get off that type of contract. And Pete, it's easy because you haven't paid the guy yet, and you can get prospects in return for him. So, like I said, these are just preliminary discussions. And as the trade deadline, like we did last season, we weren't talking about hours and hours and hours on a stream. We weren't talking about the Mets being buyers. We were talking about the Mets being sellers. And we sat there as a trade deadline live stream for many hours at a time when our team was selling. That's how much we love this team. And we'll do it again this year. And we'll do it again. Because you know what? We'll look back on this stream, whether it's next year, whether it's the year after that, or 2 or 3, whenever the Mets get back into a competitive sort of mode where they become contenders again, which they are not this year, obviously. And we'll look back on those streams and say how rewarding it was, because this is a process at the end of the day. And I know a lot of people, a lot of Mets fans like to think that this is a 1 or 2 step process and they like to bypass that sort of timeline. But it is a process at the end of the day. And that's what a lot of people are going to have to hear. And I know it hurts because not a lot of people have that kind of patience. But with this organization where it is right now, objectively, us as Mets fans, we're going to need to work on our patience. That's it.
Well, yeah, and you know what? That has to be more clear from the Mets organization, though, because and that's the problem with, and Met fans were mostly agreed that, oh, you have to fire this GM, that GM, this manager, the blah blah blah. When you don't have stability at the top, changes happen based on preference of the front office and GMs or president of baseball ops. The reason why you can't just say, "Oh, fire Billy Epler" or "fire," even though I don't like Sandy Alderson, or "fire Sandy Alderson," is because when you don't have stability at the top, changes occur just based on preference of GM or president of baseball ops. When things are going wrong, they want to make their team their own philosophy. That can take time. But the problem is you have an owner that talked about 2025, and you hear Stearns sign players on 1-year deals or 1 year with options that giving them a way out at the trade deadline that doesn't really accommodate what Steve Cohen said about 2025. Now, they could be in understanding that they're just going to go nuts spending wise along with the prospects, which they could easily do. They could spend a ton of money and bring up the prospects as well. Spend money in the right spots. Like if they want to spend all their money on big time position players and use the young kids in the rotation from the minors, they could do that, right? If you want to bring up Scott and Vazel and whoever else might be ready and still have Senga, you could do that, or they could go the other way, sign a bunch of starting pitchers, big time starting pitchers, or make a trade for a starting pitcher, and then use your spots that you have in the outfield or the infield for Acuna or Gilbert and do it that way. So there is options, and that's the difference that a lot of people talk about. You can't do a rebuild and talk about 2025 like, oh, well, clearly 2024 is kind of a resetting year for 2025. You can't say that or make an impression of that 2025 is the year and then go back on your word and trade everybody and bring up all the young kids. Now, some fans might like that. Hey, we're rebuilding. We're gonna go all the young kids. But if them young kids don't turn out, you're going through a long progression here of problems where now Steve Cohen has to spend like a maniac again, and guys like Juan Soto is going to be on another team on a long-term deal. So now you got to look for the next big star. Like you can't keep on replicating the same problems.
But when was that 2025 marker like said? That was many months ago, going back to like this past at the beginning of the offseason, right?
I agree, but you know what? David Stearns even brought that up in a couple of interviews in the offseason. So
True.
now that could have changed, and he
It's
goes,
fluid. Yeah.
Look, I think it has to be fluid. I think, look, everybody's on the table. If you can find a way to trade Francisco Lindor or Nimmo, I don't care who. If you can get a deal, look, if you can do what you did with Verlander and Scherzer and get back what you get back for paying contracts, because somebody can definitely lose Lindor. As much as Met fans can't stand him, somebody would, if you would pay the contract or most of it, there would be a team out there that would take Francisco Lindor because he's one of the better shortstops in baseball. That defense matters to a lot of teams. Don't think that's not true. And he has been clutch in the playoffs. We haven't seen it with the Mets because he only played one series with the Mets. He's in his career, he's been extremely good in the playoffs. And don't think that doesn't matter to some teams. So if you can pay most of it or some of it, and get a team that might think they're a shortstop away or a guy like Lindor away, you do it. Because you have a Mauricio who can play short. You got to think of that. Even Nimmo. I like Nimmo, and I was critical of giving him that massive contract, but Nimmo has outperformed what I even thought he can do. But you have to have everything on the table. If David Stearns in his mind doesn't have an open mind to trading anybody on this roster, then we're the same organization, just with a different face. And that's the problem. David Stearns was supposed to be the difference and the change, not the same old LOL Mets. Because you can't do that. Because you can't go half in and be half out in off seasons like they were this year, where they were kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to try to be competitive, but not really sign anybody good, or at least really good, and go into the year and be shocked or continue to say, oh, we're looking to make the playoffs. Well, obviously, the White Sox were looking to make the playoffs this year. but they're not. Like you have to be one way or the other. If you're 100% clear to the fans, we're going to do a complete rebuild. People might be mad, but you're being honest with them. You can't be half in and half out, Chris.
It comes down to this question: do you believe in the core or do you not? Mr. Nobody and Depressed Mr. Met, and I know you, Rob, have said, in the comment section is kind of saying this as well, that this core is not to be believed from what we've seen, and that you can't build around Pete Alonso. So that's the decision that the Mets are going to have to sort of come up with, and that's what they're going to have to ask themselves. If you do believe in the core, you re-sign Pete. If you don't, you trade. That's it.
Yep. And I just want to shout out everybody in the chat. Over 200 in the stream right now. So, guys, make sure you hit that like button. And I know everybody's not subscribed to my channel or Chris's channel. If you're not subscribed to either, go to the YouTube channel if you watch it on X. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button. You're going to get this type of content from me and Chris all throughout the season, and pregame, postgame, in-game, everywhere. We're going to be talking about our Mets, good or bad, because we don't shy away from the bad. Trust me, we don't. And we wouldn't have a channel if we shied away from the bad, because it's mostly bad. So make sure you hit that like button, guys. Subscribe to Chris's channel as well. He also does Knicks content, Ranger content, and all that fun stuff as well. So you get, the Knicks and Rangers are in the playoffs right now. The Knicks got Game 7 tomorrow. He's going to be doing a post game tomorrow for the Knicks. So make sure you subscribe so you get that alert. And guys, you got to remember, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but when you subscribe, hit that bell so you can get notified every time we post a video, go live, post a short. A lot of people will say, oh, I missed your stream. I didn't know it was coming. Well, you got to hit that bell, because then it notifies you when we put up a stream hours in advance. So you guys have an idea of that. So, Chris, keep going. I'm sorry. If you want to talk more about the Mets or in the comments.
No. I mean, like you said, Rob, subscribe. The Blue Shirts banner post-game shows have been a hit. Obviously, the Rangers made the Eastern Conference Final, so we'll be doing that going into next week in the Florida series. Hopefully, the Knicks are able to punch their ticket. I know they're dealing with a lot of injuries. We'll talk about it tomorrow, regardless of what the result is on the True Knicks Talk post-game. I agree with you. We are going to be up here, and really, I think we've exhausted the sort of talk in this chat about the Mets today. I think we do, or I think we did. So, we're gonna be here, man. As Mets fans, we've been doing this for a little bit. I know you've been doing this for a lot longer than I have, especially on YouTube. We're gonna be here. So, rock with us. Yeah. Like we said, we did a marathon stream for the trade deadline last year when the Mets were sellers. That still bogs my mind.
Chris, you remember that we were still doing a stream. You guys are keeping it going while I was driving to pick up my cat. And I'm in the stream driving on the LIE, driving to pick up my cat from the vet. Like, I mean, that's what we did. This is what we do. Me, you, Nelson, Hayden on the round. Like, it was just crazy how much, like, even during the worst time as a fan, when your team is getting rid of players you might like and love, and we were still trying to talk about it, knowing that the next 75 games are pointless. And like, we were talking on the roundtable every week about everything but the games. I do not want that again. It's leading towards that. But I mean, look, negativity draws viewers. We haven't had 200 in a stream in a lot of these streams for a while, probably since the off season, because of the fact that negativity drives views. And I would hope positive Mets brings up views as well, because 2022 was a great year for my channel because the Mets were so good. But, everybody just needs to voice their opinion and vent. Like, it's therapy for all of us, as I said earlier in the stream. That's what we got to do. And look, we talked about all the talking points. The game, you can't change it, right? You got to go out tomorrow, salvage the series, and try to get back to 500. Like that's the goal now. Try to get back to 500 and hope for the best. Like, you just hope that the guys on this team get it together. And that goes for Diaz. That goes for Lindor. Like, that goes for a lot of the guys that are struggling right now. Pete Alonso is starting to look like he's getting out of it a little bit. Nimmo looking like he's getting out of it. JD Martinez is a beast. Vientos had a really good game. Jeff McNeil looking like he actually knows how to hit again. That's a good sign for the offense. But they can't score 9 runs today and score 1 tomorrow. Like, there has to be consistency at this point, Chris. And, before we cut the stream, to finish up the post game, what do you want to say about this team before we call it a night?
Oh man, it's not going to be anything good. It's not going to be anything good. But nonetheless, like you said, there are flashes of positivity here. There's flashes of brilliance. JD Martinez, man, like that guy. Regardless if we get a half a season out of him or a full season out of him, he's only signed for that 1-year deal, I believe, as well. So, regardless of what we get, it's been a true pleasure to just see him every single day. And I love the sort of talking point on the broadcast about JD Martinez saying that filming your batting practice session swings is more conducive to some success in terms of fixing your swing than your in-game live swings are, right? When you look in the iPad mid-game, he has his own tripod set up right there looking at him from the side view angle. And I used to do this all the time when I used to play baseball as well. So that's why I really resonated with that, because I'm like, every single time I took BP on the field, I had that tripod right there. And so to see JD Martinez, an actual big leaguer, do the same thing, it's awesome to see. And that really just like reinforces the idea of like his discipline, right? And we talk about the hitting coaches, Jeremy Barnes, where there's Chili Davis, whatever your opinions on these hitting coaches are, Eric Chavez, and you see a player come in and not only show you by example the type of discipline and the approach and the mindset that you have to have at the plate and when you're taking batting practice, but also now helping one of your best hitters, part of this core, Pete Alonso, that showed me a lot. So I really think JD Martinez, regardless of how long he's here, can really make an impact to guys like the younger guys, like Brett Beatty, like Mark Vientos. At least that will be worth something. So that's really the only positivity I got. Luis Severino didn't do too bad. Obviously, he got extended a little bit today. The pitching in general wasn't great. Edwin Diaz wasn't great. There's nothing really else to say about this team. We'll be on here whether this team wins or loses. We're not going anywhere. So subscribe. And yeah, hit that thumbs up. That's all I really got to say. Like I said, I'm trying to take like processes of successes right now that the Mets can carry forward. Like, can these veterans help out these young guys? Because this team is going to shift to a younger nucleus here in the future. And we need these guys to soak up this experience and the advice. Who's giving the advice? I don't know. Besides JD Martinez, I don't know if the Mets, like Lindor's always giving advice to the infielders, but I don't know who else is giving advice to these guys. But yeah, I don't know, man. I'm still speechless at this loss. But anyways, Mets lose. I'm gonna stop rambling on here. I hope everyone else enjoys the rest of their Saturday nights. I know it's around 8:45 right now, approaching 8:45. I'm gonna enjoy the rest of my night. Don't know if we'll be back on here, schedule permitting, whatever your schedule is tomorrow, Rob. You said you're gonna do an in-game live, right?
I'm most likely going to do it. I might be hanging out to watch the next game with people. I found some New Yorkers around my way, so I'm gonna try
Nice.
to. Yeah. I know a lot of Met fans
I'm
too, which
watching.
is odd.
Yeah, I'm watching the Knicks game tomorrow. I'm
Of
watching the
course.
Knicks game tomorrow. If we can get a pregame going, maybe I'll do that. But I'm watching the Knicks game tomorrow, and we'll be back at it with Mets content next
Yep.
week. I think we all deserve a sort of mental break from this team right now. So I don't blame anybody for taking one. So that's it. That's all I got.
Yep. And you look, guys, 45 games into the season. Stearns talked about it. It goes by quarters, right? Or tiers, as he says, right? 45 games. This is the first quarter of 4 quarters. There's 3 more quarters to go. But quarter 3, third quarter, fourth quarter is irrelevant because the second quarter, which is the next 45 games, leads up right to the trade deadline around 90 games. We got 45 of those games to go. This last around a month and I guess a half of games is going to determine, are we 100% buyers, 100% sellers, or are we in between? That's what we have to know with this team within the next 45 games. the Mets can salvage the series tomorrow. Try to get back on track. Try to get to 500. That's the goal right now. Nothing else. Get back to 500, and now we can have conversations about getting over 500 and what else we have to do to get better. Because at this moment, there's nothing that matters than getting to 500. And you know what? You could talk about the coaches, like you said, Chris, telling these players what to do. The players are in the batter's box. The players are on the mound. They have to do the job. They want all this money. They want to be, known as the best player on the team or heroes or whatever the hell they want to be called. You got to do it on the field. You got to do it in the batter's box and on the mound. It's up to the guys that are the main guys of this team. They got to start putting this team on their shoulders. Stop. Look, Marte, Bader, McNeil, Vientos. Those were the guys that did everything today. Obviously, JD Martinez, but Nimmo, Alonso, Lindor. They were okay, but they weren't good enough, right? Pete Alonso, ground ball in the 10th. You can't do that. If you're the guy, get a base hit. Get Lindor in the 10th inning, right? It's little things like that continues to talk about, is this core the core you go in the future? We don't know that as of yet. We got 45 games to figure this out. With that said, Chris, it's always a pleasure.
Always.
Mets post-game show. It was a live one. It was a crazy one. Over 200 in the stream, guys. On X, on YouTube. I appreciate it, guys. Before you go, hit on that like button and subscribe. Mets lose 10-9 in terrible fashion. 4-run lead, 5-run lead down the drain. With that said, guys, have a great night. As always, let's go Mets. We'll see you next time. Good night, guys.
Let's go Mets.